Hi everybody. Today we are going to ask some questions. Oya. Yeah, that's her name. She's not Russian actually, but she is a brave girl because she lives here and even is going to continue it. So Oya, first of all, what is your background? Yeah, where you came from? What did you do before you moved to Russia?
Uh-huh. I'm born in Brussels. Most of my life of my lifetime I spent in Belgium. I'm a student. I studied anthropology, and as an anthropology student, I traveled a lot. I did a lot of I had ethnographic stays for instance, Kyrgyzstan and so on. And Russia was actually part of that. So I came to Russia 2 years ago to study Russian and to do a internship at the anthropology faculty of the Moscow Humanitarian University.
Is Russian language difficult for you?
Very. Actually, I got a scholarship because they said in Belgium that I had really good, like I was very talented, and I thought, okay, I got this. I speak French, I speak Dutch, I speak English. I got this, and I came to Russia. Initially, I came only for 1 year, and actually, after 2 months, I understood that I had to stay. I didn't need like a year was not enough. I needed 10 at least. So yeah, it's a very difficult language, very creative as well, and there are a bunch of synonyms for just one word, and you just have to continue studying new words all the time, and the grammar is also very, very, yeah, difficult.
You know the funny thing that some novels of Hemingway that are translated in Russia, they are much more interesting to read than in origin. You know, yeah, because Hemingway, he wrote very simple, and we have some, color of language. We call it. Okay, so do you live in Moscow?
Yes, I live in Moscow.
How would you describe Moscow as a city, Moscow people, and so on?
First of all, Moscow is really huge. When friends come over from Belgium and they have like a week, for instance, to do a city trip in Moscow, they're like stressing because they are like, oh my god, like I have 3 days left and I didn't see half of it, and I'm like, yeah, it's like tripping through all of Belgium actually, like, but it's just one city. It's really, the infrastructure is huge, it's big, and I always thought, like, after like traveling with the metro daily in Moscow, I thought no city, no capital will ever be good enough for me, because the infrastructure, I think, is the best in the world, and everything is huge and beautiful, and it's clean, it's safe as well. Like, if you go party, for instance, in the city center at 3, 4 in the morning, you can walk to your home. Nobody comes and disturbs you, because there is not such a culture of, coming and talking to girls, for instance, in the street. Whereas I hear, for instance, from my American friends that this is the case in America and everybody's kind of scared. But here you feel super safe, actually. About the people, in the beginning, I thought, oh wow, Russians are rude. Like, that's what we have, right? Russians are cold, they're rude.
They don't smile.
Exactly, exactly. But then, actually, you're like, after a while, you're like, why would they? Like, why would I smile to strangers? Like, why would I talk? Why would I be nice? They're so right. Yeah, and also, what I actually, through experience, I acknowledged that, for instance, a Russian person, like, for instance, you go buy your bread. The first day, they will be very, like, just normal, you buy your bread, that's it. But the second day or the third day, when they recognize you, they're like, oh, I recognize you, how are you? And, like, for instance, my coffee shop, where I daily buy my coffee, like, next to my house, he became like my friend, or my psychologist, for instance, where you daily go to and you have a chat, and he's giving you like motivations about how life is in Moscow, and that you shouldn't give up when, there's a problem or something. And, like, you have actually like these beautiful friendships that come about, like, but of course not the first day. And I think in Europe it's like the other way around. People are very nice to you, kind, they chit chat, but there is no friendship coming out of it. Like,
From heart.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, I quite agree with you. about that, but it's quite opposite to the information that comes from some newspapers in Europe or in the USA, in the US.
True. And you know what? I think it's also because people want to grasp or they think they understand Russia or the Russian culture without being anchored in Russia. Like, you cannot understand the country and how the dynamism, kind of the dynamics of the people, if you are not here, like if you don't, for instance, if you're not, like, how do you say it, like if you're not part of a network of people, of locals. For instance, people talk about like, oh, like for instance, I all the time I hear like, oh, you cannot tell your can you actually talk about what you think about, for instance, Putin or the country freely? Won't you go to prison? And it's like, yeah, but do you know all these channels where, you know, people talk about their opinions, for instance, VK, YouTube, without knowing that, you cannot know the freedom of press or the freedom of opinion and so on, and the freedom of thought and of speech. And these things, I think people just cannot understand it, again, because the language is difficult, because you have to invest a lot of resources, you have to try to, yeah, intellect as well. You have to try to grasp how it all works.
And maybe some of barrier between Russia and, I don't know, for instance, Europe via media that produce some, you know, well, calamity actually about country.
Absolutely. I also see this, for instance, in academia. I studied anthropology and I studied about the Soviet Union and so on, for instance. We don't have the books or the knowledge that you guys have because it's just not being translated. And I just don't understand why there is not this, this longing actually to information from the locals, like.
Okay, I got a couple from Brussels, and in St. Petersburg, I'm actually a guide. So they wanted an excursion, and when we came to my car and I opened it, they were very astonished because my bag was inside. And they asked me a question, what is that? Don't you, you don't afraid to leave your belongings inside your car? I asked him back, well, what's wrong with that? They said that in Brussels, in an hour or in two, your glass of your car would be broken by some stranger and so on. Is it true?
True, absolutely. Brussels, definitely. Again, like in Brussels, you can't just go into the metro, for instance, after 10 p.m. You can't. As a woman, you can't. It's dangerous, I don't know. Yeah, it is actually dangerous. We have a lot of things happen, like harassment and stuff. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, in Moscow you don't have this, whereas it's the other way around. People think Brussels is very safe and Moscow is very dangerous, but not at all. Like last week, I had some friends from Brussels here who traveled, and I hosted them, and they said, "Oh my God, Moscow it's full of life. Like it's colorful." And apparently, all the movies about Russia and Moscow and stuff, they all use this blue filter to like show that it's all gray and cold and you know, and it's like, no, it's actually super. Like winter in Moscow, it's like. It's my favorite season in Moscow. Like, even though it's like -20, you don't feel it because, you know, it's so beautiful, and you know, like little lights and colors everywhere, and I don't know, the whole city lights up. And yeah, so these things really do happen. Like,
well, it's very interesting because we are talking about stereotypes. I also thought that in Brussels, well, it's safe and so on, and I told them back that our thieves, even if they get in your car while they opened it quite, you know, gently, they don't break glasses. For many years, our thieves are much more cultural. I don't know how to put it. And the second thing is that since we're Russians and we're very strong people, if we got the thief, well, we can beat them up. Yeah, and not any police will involve involved in that, and they know that, the thieves. That's why it's very safe to leave your belongings inside a car or the car, well, whatever you like. Okay, let's talk about some other stuff about Moscow and Russia. Well, I've been to Brussels, well, for half of a day, but I've been to Paris very often. So, well, to New York, to Berlin, and so on. And I can say that probably Russia has now the best internet in the world, according to, I mean, Wi-Fi, yeah, well, 4G and so on. What do you think about that?
I agree. In the sense, also, like, I'm not really an IT person or a technician, so I don't know what good internet really is. But what I can say is that in Moscow, internet, like just mobile internet or something, it's very cheap and good. Like you can get, for instance, 15 gigabyte for like 400 rubles, whereas like monthly, that's what is that, 400 rubles, like €5, €6. Whereas in Belgium, you have to pay like minimum €15 for like 1 gigabyte per month, and I don't understand like why or how, but yeah, I think Moscow is very much ahead actually of on certain, like on these.
And we have free Wi-Fi in the city, in transport, in metro, and so on. You don't have that kind of stuff in all other big cities in Europe.
True. But do you feel like, for instance, I feel like if here as a non-Russian, if you don't have internet, you're done. Like you're lost. That's why, like, it's really, I feel good about like the fact that there is like internet provided everywhere. Do you feel like that as well when you're in, for instance, Berlin or Brussels or Paris? Like,
Well, maybe I'm not, because I'm a very experienced person. Well, so I can't get lost in any big city. Well, since I can speak French, for instance. But I understand what are you talking about. So the next question is, if we're going to compare Russian girls and, well, girls from Belgium, for instance, what are yeah, what are the major difference between them?
oh, okay. This is a difficult one because let's say, like, if Belgian people will watch this video, they will be mad at me because, you know, we have like the Flemish speaking part, the French speaking part. So what is Belgian? But let me say, if you compare them, like I will just talk about the stereotypes. I think the Russian women are more outgoing than the Belgian ones. In Belgium, they're quite more. How do you say it? Like they're more careful, let's say. They're more
Stick to their homes.
exactly, yeah. Like whereas Russian women are more outgoing, more courageous, and they want to discover as well. In the beginning, they might seem cold because they have to, you know, they have to know who you are, what they're dealing with and stuff. But if you look at their lives, their characters, they have much more. Yeah, they're have much more capacities, I would say, like character-wise. Whereas, yeah, Belgian girls are more silent, more like good girls, discreet. Yes, discreet is a word. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
So, well, the next question about men.
The men. Oh, the men. I love the men more because, you know why? And it's not because-
Really?
No, it's because the Russian women, they're like a world brand, you know, they're global. But Russian men are so fucking underrated. Nobody knows about them.
Well, you get it. Underrated.
It is because, like, the stereotype about the Russian men, and I think it's quite true to some extent, is like they're reckless. That's what they teach us also at school. Like Russian men, you just, you know. But when I came here, I actually discovered how cultured and nice Russian men can be, which you don't have in Europe. Like here, every man that you don't know, like for instance, strangers on this that you meet on the streets, they always open the doors for you. They serve the women. For instance, they help you get out of walk out of a tram or to cross the street, and they don't ask your number afterwards. They just say, "Have a great day, miss," like, and then they go. Whereas in Belgium, if a man does that, you know that in like after that he will come and ask your number, and then and that's why you're always like, no, I'm a feminist, don't touch me, I'll do it I'll do everything myself, I'll pay for my own coffee because afterwards I don't want to have shit on my head, like, I mean. But men here in Russia, they're not like that. It's just like they just serve you because you're a woman, and that's really nice. And and they accept everything. Like, it's not because you accept, for instance, this person to help you, that he wants something back in return or something. Or that's why I'm like, the Russian men, they're like, yeah, they're definitely underrated.
Well, the question that comes from the previous one, maybe in Europe, that is the consequence of some feminist movement. Mm-hmm. What about that? I mean that men are afraid of being helpful to women because they're afraid of being sued for that and so on.
True, but also why? I think women exaggerate. Like, they overreact. They don't exaggerate, but they overreact. Why? Because it's a reaction to something, some past, actually. Because women are like, I don't know. It's like I remember, like, men in Europe, and I think also to some extent also in the States, they're very pushy. Like that's why women are just like from the beginning on like, no. And from like, you just make one step towards a woman, like, help it. Women think like, help her, and women think like, okay, what does this man want?
Harassment.
Exactly. Or like, I don't know, like sex or something, like very big, like, whereas the man just wanted to get to know you, but you think, oh no, and there is also a lot of slut shaming, for instance, in Europe going on, in the States as well, probably. I mean, you know it better, but so these are things that women there have to they're struggling with, and that's why I think there is this overreactive feminism thing going on, which is to some extent I can like I understand it, because I was also like I know this reality as well, this part of reality. So
Okay, what are your plans about Russia?
well, so I'm here. I live here for 2 years now, so I have 8 more years to go to study. Like, I would love to speak in Russian fluently and freely, because it's a very interesting language, and it's also a very fun to speak language, because you have like these like, just change a couple of letters or like a suffix in a word, this whole word becomes has a different meaning. And sometimes you make like a lot of mistakes, and I think it's really fun when you go back, because when I came once I came late to a class, and I opened the door and said, sorry, I overslept, meaning like my alarm clock, I didn't hear it, but I said it in Russian, and actually I said, I'm sorry, I had sex or something, like, я переспала, and I didn't know it, and then somebody told it to me like 3 months later, like, actually this means that, and I'm like, oh my god, okay. But it's very fun, that's what I mean, like, it's very inventive, it's very nice, and I'm like, it's a cool thing, like, it's not like Dutch or something where you have everything, like, or German, or it's a very innovative, creative language. And so I would love to explore more of Russia. I would love to travel more also, because in 2 years time you don't see anything, like even Moscow I have to discover more. And so I would love to work here, because also the economy is very dynamic and very vibrant. I've felt like I feel like in Europe they already reached some kind of level, and so that's why everything is exactly. Whereas here it's like at any moment everything can happen, and it's like very interesting to live in if you're young.